Black girl wins national math contest. Judges demand a retest. Then the truth comes out. The numbers always made sense to her, even when the world didn't. Amara Johnson, 13 years old, sat cross-legged on the cracked concrete steps of her apartment building. A battered math workbook in her lap and a pencil dancing between her fingers. The sun dipped behind the buildings of Southside Ridge, a neighborhood most people only mentioned when talking about crime rates or poverty statistics. But to Amara, it was home, a place filled with church choirs on Sundays. Laughter that echoed through thin apartment walls, and the warm smell of cornbread wafting from every kitchen window. Inside apartment 3B, her mother was getting ready for another 12-hour night shift at the hospital. Scrubs ironed, hair pulled back, eyes tired. Her father had already left for his security job at the auto plant. They rarely saw each other in the same room except on Sundays, and even then. Exhaustion was the third guest at the dinner table. They didn't complain. They didn't have time to. Amara never told them how often she saw the way people looked at them in grocery stores, eyes filled with assumptions. Heads slightly tilted like they were trying to make sense of how someone like her mother, a black woman, could be speaking with such poise, or how someone like her dad walked with that kind of quiet pride. But Amara noticed. She always noticed. She also noticed patterns, numbers, rhythms, sequences that whispered solutions to her like secrets only she could hear. By second grade, she could multiply 4-digit numbers in her head. Her teacher at the time had given her a sticker that said, "Math Magician," and then asked if she had copied answers from someone else's paper. "She's just lucky," one of the parents had said at a parent-teacher meeting. Or maybe the test was too easy this year. It was always like that. Amara didn't know what hurt more, the disbelief or the way even her victories were twisted into something accidental. It wasn't until she met Mr. Lee in 7th grade that something shifted. He was young, maybe in his 30s, Korean American, with a quiet voice and chalk-stained hands. On the first day of class, he handed her a pre-test with questions so difficult half the class groaned. She finished it in 16 minutes. He called her to his desk after class, not to accuse her, but to ask where she learned to think like that. "No one taught me," she said. "It just makes sense." He watched her in silence. And then he smiled, not the condescending kind of smile she was used to, but one of genuine recognition. "You ever think about the national math contest?" he asked. She blinked. "The what?" A week later, he placed a packet of past competition problems on her desk. "Let's see how far you can go." They started working after school. He brought in old problems, challenge puzzles, logic games. Sometimes he'd bring takeout when her stomach growled too loud. He never doubted her, not once. And that, to Amara, was almost scarier than all the doubt she'd faced before, because belief carried weight. And expectations came with a target. One evening, as her mother sat on the couch tying her shoelaces, Amara looked up from a geometry textbook and asked, "Mama, why are people always surprised when I'm good at math?" Her mother paused. "What do you mean, baby? Like they don't expect it? Like I'm not supposed to be?" Her mother sighed and came to sit beside her. "Because the world made up its mind about us before it ever met you. But that don't mean you let it stay that way." Amara nodded slowly. She didn't cry. She just turned the page and kept studying. 3 months later, a white envelope with the contest seal arrived in the mailbox. Inside was a letter printed on thick, official paper. "Congratulations, Amara Johnson. You have qualified for the National Mathematics Championship Finals." She stood on the stoop in the fading daylight, holding the letter in both hands, her fingers trembling just a little. The corners of her mouth curled into a cautious smile. The numbers had made sense all along. Now the world would have to catch up. The air inside the Hilton Conference Center was cold and bright, buzzing with a quiet tension that only true competitors knew how to breathe. Banners for the 28th National Math Olympiad hung proudly above the registration table. Rows of students in crisp uniforms, polo shirts, and sweatshirts with names like Northridge Academy and Lexington Honors Prep crowded into assigned seats. Their parents standing to the side, murmuring last-minute encouragements or clicking away on phones. Amara stood alone near the back of the room, holding her contestant badge tight in her hand. Around her, heads turned. Some students gave quick, polite glances before looking away. Others didn't bother hiding the confusion on their faces. She could hear it in the hushed voices. Is she in the right room? Maybe she's here for the spelling bee. Amara didn't flinch. She walked forward, spine straight, and found her assigned seat, row 3. Seat 12. A boy with glasses already sitting next to her shifted uncomfortably when she sat down. He gave her a short nod, then turned back to his notes. Lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Lee gave her a quick thumbs up from the observation gallery. His face calm but alert. He wasn't allowed to speak to her now. No coaches were, but his presence was enough. The first round began with a sharp ding from the speaker system. 30 students, 90 minutes, 20 problems. Most of them had taken weeks to prepare. Some came from elite academies with private tutors, online coaching, and weekly strategy sessions. Amara had prepared at the kitchen table between laundry loads and night shifts. She read the first question, a logic proof involving prime numbers and modulo theory. Her pencil began to move. The outside world dissolved. She didn't notice when other students shifted in their seats. Didn't hear the first whispered sighs or groans. She was deep in the rhythm now, pattern recognition, simplification, strategy, question after question. The numbers spoke to her in a language no one else seemed to hear. Round 2 brought geometric puzzles that made even the top-ranked students sweat. Amara drew diagrams faster than she could speak. Round 3 was a timed mental math challenge, 15 questions. No calculator, no notes. She answered 14 before time ran out. The room was silent except for the occasional cough or frustrated pencil tap. Break time. Amara stepped into the hallway, stretching her fingers. A cluster of boys nearby were whispering again. How's she doing that? No way she's clean. She must have memorized the problems. These look like last year's. She didn't confront them. She just closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. Then the final round. 3 open-ended problems. The kind that asked not just for answers, but proof, logic, elegance. The kind that exposed not what you knew, but how you thought. She loved these the most. And she crushed them. Hours later, as the students filed back into the ballroom for the announcement, Amara sat quietly in her chair. The scoreboard was projected behind the judges' table. Tension rose with each name read aloud in reverse order. 3rd place, then 2nd, and now, said the lead judge, a thin man in a tweed jacket who had barely looked at Amara during check-in. The champion of this year's National Math Olympiad. A pause, with a perfect score across all rounds. Another pause. Whispers rippled through the audience. Amara Johnson. The room fell silent. Chairs creaked. No one clapped for a full 5 seconds. Then a few hands clapped, scattered. Hesitant. Mr. Lee stood, clapping harder than anyone. A few other teachers joined him. But the applause never quite reached full volume. A woman near the front stood abruptly. Face flushed. Her son had placed 2nd. There must be some mistake, she said loudly. The judge blinked. Excuse me? She couldn't have scored perfect. That's not possible. Murmurs erupted around her. Some nodded in quiet agreement. Others just looked uncomfortable. We're going to double-check the results, another official said quickly. It's standard procedure in cases of a tie or anomaly. There was no tie. Someone whispered. Amara stood frozen, her certificate in her hand. She looked up at the screen. Her name still glowed in white and gold. Mr. Lee made his way to her side, ignoring the judge's attempt to stall. You did it, he said quietly. Amara looked up at him, eyes wide but unreadable. Did I? They're acting like I didn't. He didn't smile. That's the part where they catch up. Behind them, the judges huddled, voices tight and faces tense. The celebration had turned into a debate. The trophy stayed on the table, untouched. The morning after the award ceremony, the sun rose over Southside Ridge like any other day. But for Amara Johnson, nothing felt the same. She sat in her small kitchen, eating toast without tasting it. Her mother bustled quietly behind her, pouring coffee, careful not to say too much too soon. Then the email came. It dinged quietly on her phone, but the words hit like thunder. Subject: Request for retest, National Math Olympiad. Dear Ms. Johnson, due to anomalies in scoring and concerns raised regarding your performance, we are requesting that you complete a secondary assessment to confirm the validity of your results. This will be conducted under strict supervision to ensure fairness and accuracy for all participants. Please respond within 48 hours. Amara stared at the screen, her hands trembling, Her toast dropped onto the plate with a soft thud. Her mother read the email over her shoulder, then pulled out a chair and sat down hard. "They're saying you cheated," she said, voice tight. "After everything you did." Mr. Lee called within 10 minutes. He was breathless, furious. "This is outrageous," he said. "They've never done this before. Never, not for anyone. They think I couldn't do it." Amara whispered. He didn't answer at first. Just silence. Then, slowly, "They don't want to believe you could." Word hadn't made it to the news yet, but the whispers online were growing louder. In obscure math forums and academic group chats, screenshots of the scoreboard circulated with captions like, "Perfect score from a public school kid in Chicago? Unlikely. This has to be a fluke. Ivy League prep schools trained for this all year. First time I've ever seen someone like her win nationals." That last one stung the most. Someone like her. Amara curled into the corner of the couch and cried. Not loud sobs, just quiet, shaking tears that wouldn't stop. Her mother sat beside her, running fingers through her hair like she had when Amara was 5 and scared of thunder. "They don't see you, baby. They see their fear. But that doesn't mean you stop." "I did everything right," Amara whispered. "Why do I have to prove it again?" Her mother kissed her forehead. "Because sometimes, when you're first, you don't just have to win. You have to make it undeniable." Amara wiped her eyes. "Then I'll do it, but on my terms." Later that night, with Mr. Lee on speakerphone and both her parents sitting at the table, Amara drafted her response. "I will agree to the retest under the following conditions. The session must be recorded in full. A third-party mathematics expert must oversee the questions. The grading must be done publicly, with a representative from a major educational outlet present. Transparency for all parties." She hit send. 2 days later, the Math Olympiad committee reluctantly agreed. The retest would take place at their headquarters in Washington, D.C., a neutral ground. They said it would be closed to the public, but overseen by a supervising board, 1 Olympiad judge, 1 university professor of mathematics, 1 education journalist, and 1 independent observer from a civil rights education group. As Amara and her mother boarded the plane, the news finally broke. National math champion asked to retest after controversy. Racial bias allegations swirl after historic win. Genius or fluke? The country waits to see. When they arrived at the test location, a sleek, sterile office building downtown, cameras were already waiting outside, though they weren't allowed in. Inside the boardroom, Amara sat alone at the center of a glass-walled conference space. Cameras mounted in corners, a digital clock on the wall. 4 observers behind her, silent but watchful. The air was colder than any competition room she'd known. The lead proctor slid a sealed envelope across the table. "These problems have not been released anywhere publicly," he said. "Designed by university faculty specifically for this session." Amara nodded, said nothing. As the clock started, silence fell. Everyone held their breath. She picked up her pencil and began. The retest room felt less like a place for learning and more like an interrogation chamber. White walls, a long, cold conference table, cameras mounted in each corner, their little red lights blinking like watchful eyes. 4 adults sat behind a pane of glass, the university professor, the education journalist, the Olympiad judge, and the civil rights observer. All were silent, stone-faced, unreadable. At the center of it all sat Amara. She wore a navy blue sweater, her braids tied back neatly. In front of her sat a thick packet of problems, still sealed, and a single mechanical pencil. No calculator, no notes, no one else. A small timer on the far wall blinked 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. "Begin," said the proctor. The timer started. Amara flipped the first page. The problems were brutal, harder than anything from the national round. Not just equations, but proof-based reasoning layered with twists. Open-ended modeling challenges, theoretical logic with multiple solutions. But Amara didn't flinch. Her pencil began to move. 10 minutes in, the observers were already leaning in. She tackled the first problem with clarity and confidence, not only finding the correct answer, but presenting a streamlined method none of them expected. The university professor raised an eyebrow, then jotted a note. At 20 minutes, she reached a multivariable optimization task that normally took graduate students a full hour. She solved it in 10, and did so with an elegant geometric shortcut that made the Olympiad judge shift uncomfortably in his seat. By the 40-minute mark, she was done, completely done. She sat back, breathing slowly, pencil resting on the table. The silence was deafening. The journalist finally broke it. She finished. The civil rights observer leaned forward, and she showed every step. The professor flipped through her pages quickly. His expression changed, from scrutiny to disbelief. And finally, quiet admiration. "This isn't luck," he said softly. "This is brilliance." The Olympiad judge, red-faced, cleared his throat. Her solution to problem 4. "Did you see that substitution? That's not in any textbook I've seen." "Because it's not in one," the professor replied. "It's original. And it works." Someone opened the door. A staff member rushed in, holding a tablet. "The stream's gone viral," she whispered. "Over 200,000 viewers in the last hour. It's trending globally." The observers looked at one another. A moment later, the judge stood and stepped into the room. He walked slowly toward Amara, who had remained still, eyes forward. He opened his mouth to speak, paused, and exhaled. "We were wrong," he said quietly, not looking at anyone else in the room. Amara turned her head toward him. Her voice was calm, steady. "No," she said, "you weren't wrong about the math. You were wrong about me." The words hung in the air like a verdict. No one responded. They didn't need to. Because at that moment, everyone in that room, and everyone watching online, knew the truth. Knew it with absolute clarity. Amara Johnson hadn't just proven she could win. She had made it undeniable. Within 24 hours of the retest, Amara's name was everywhere. News outlets scrambled to catch up with a story that had already gone global. Videos of the retest were clipped and shared across platforms, accompanied by headlines like, "13-year-old math prodigy silences doubters with flawless retest." They said she cheated. She proved them all wrong, on camera. Meet Amara Johnson, the genius they tried to dismiss. But then came the deeper digging. A whistleblower from within the Olympiad committee leaked a chain of internal emails. The messages weren't just careless, they were damning. One judge had written, "A top score from a Southside girl? Highly suspect. We should vet this carefully." Another, "I'd bet anything this was coached or lucky. Let's not hand the trophy over just to be politically correct." Screenshots of the emails flooded Twitter. Outrage followed. Hashtag let her shine. Hashtag Amara the math queen. Hashtag math is not white. People marched outside the Olympiad headquarters. Letters were written. High-profile scientists and professors published open statements demanding accountability. The pressure mounted until the U.S. Department of Education stepped in, announcing an official investigation into bias and misconduct in national academic competitions. The Olympiad board was forced to restructure. 2 judges resigned. 1 was dismissed. Meanwhile, Amara, once just a girl who loved numbers, became a national symbol of excellence and resilience. A few days later, she received a letter printed on thick, gold-embossed stationery. The American Institute for Advanced Mathematics is proud to award Amara Johnson the special distinction in mathematical reasoning, the youngest recipient in our institution's history. There was no press conference. No staged apology from the committee. Just truth, finally spoken aloud. The following month, Amara was invited to speak at the National Education Summit in Washington, D.C. She wore a simple dress, her hair in the same tight braids. As she walked on stage, the room of educators, policymakers, and students gave her a standing ovation that lasted nearly a full minute. She stepped up to the microphone, smiled gently, and said, "Some people thought I didn't belong in that competition. Not because of my scores, but because of where I come from, and what I look like. But math doesn't care about zip codes or skin color. Math is fair. People aren't. When I got the perfect score, they didn't question the questions. They questioned me, but I didn't go back to prove them wrong about the numbers. I went back to prove them wrong about who can belong." So to every kid who's ever been looked at like they're out of place in a gifted classroom, I want to say, don't let them measure your worth by their limits. You don't have to shrink so they can feel big. Make them rise to meet you. The room stood again, louder, longer. Later, in a quiet interview with a local Chicago station, the reporter leaned in and asked, "Do you think they'll treat kids like you differently now?" Amara smiled, small and knowing. "Maybe," she said, "but either way, they'll remember my name." She stood, collected her papers, and walked out. As the camera faded to black, her final words echoed, "I'm not just good at math. I'm good at making them listen." If this story moved you, share it, because the world needs to hear voices like Amara's. Until next time, stay strong, speak up, and never let anyone dim your light.